Hello, and welcome to another Saturday Night Synthesis. I'm your host, Alex, and tonight we have a great show. Here in Baltimore, it's 1,000,000 degrees, and on Long Island, it's 100 million plus degrees. And I hope wherever you are, it's 100 million degrees in your heart, and you're ready to love some music. That was an amazing performance. I was really into it. I can't wait to hear about how he made all those sounds. What other sounds are we going to hear this week? Do we have a secret weapon up our sleeves for this ambient-themed show? In fact, we do. We have a special guest. He's coming to you tonight. He's got a song. Welcome to the show. Real quick here, Piotr Garbaczonek.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you are welcome. Piotr, how's it going? Thank you so much for coming to the show. While you're sharing this space virtually with us, where are you in Meat Space right now?
I am currently located in Marina, California, which is about 5 miles from Monterey. And it's getting dark outside.
That is one of the funny things about doing these shows is that it's always someone different color out the window everywhere. Although most people are in the basement. But we're going to hear more from Piotr in a little bit. He's got a song for us. We're going to have a nice chat. I'm really interested in what he has to say. If you out there have any questions or comments about the show, if you're watching on YouTube right now, leave them in the comments of this episode, and we're going to check them out. Also, check out our Instagram. Ours is at Saturday Night Synthesis. And Piotr's Instagram and YouTube pages, which he updates frequently, are going to also be links in the notes of the show. So check them out there. And while you're pressing buttons on YouTube, why don't you like and subscribe to this? For people who, well, no one actually cares, but I'm going to pretend for the show that we only have 185 more subscriptions until I believe the law of YouTube is either Frederick or I have to engage in celebrity boxing with Floyd Mayweather. I'm not sure. I'm not the boss of the internet, but I think that's how that works. So if you'd like to see that, like and subscribe. And now, having gotten through that various adieus, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the man, the myth, the legend, coming at you from semi-permanent exile, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego inside an oven, Frederick Foxtrott.
Yes, exactly. This is, as you can see right now, this is a warm day here in Long Island. It's officially summertime. So what that means is you have a bunch of Long Islanders who are doing the Sisyphean task of trying to maintain a lawn. It's like trying to grow grass on a dry beach. They will irrigate all summer long, and it will still maintain that beautiful toasty brown hue that we've come to love so much. How about you, Alex? I realize I very rarely do, is I never throw it back to you and ask you, how are you doing? How are things going over there? Down in Baltimore, are things cooler than they are here?
No, but a little better set up for it. A couple things that today, I feel like living south of the Mason-Dixon line, I've fully embraced the koozie life. It's hot outside and you want to keep your beer cold. And so you put it in a koozie. And I'm like, I can see why this is so popular. Oh, and cicadas. It's cicada time here in Baltimore. We are close to ground zero for the brood cicadas. And they just started coming. They started making noise yesterday. 5 days after they're born, they start making noise. Or not born, metamorphosize. And it's really interesting. It's like lot by lot. Like some people's lots don't have any. We have about probably a couple hundred between the big trees in all our yards, which is really more. I really like cicadas, so that's cool. And then there's a house 4 blocks down. Like you can just see the ground moving in the mornings as they all come up. And we went down there to check it out with my 3.5-year-old, and she was literally using a snow shovel to heap skins and cicada corpses into a wheelbarrow that was overflowing. I mean, literally a snow shovel full of cicadas, just scooping them from her tree. It was wild. But then, the house lot next door doesn't have any of them. So I don't know. It's really interesting, but it's cicada time. It's just going to get louder and louder and louder and louder. We're at Cicada Talk here on Saturday nights. We've touched eschew music. No one cares. Let's just talk cicadas. My theory is there are lots of maple trees because cicadas drink sap.
That's right.
I
wanted you to know you also get a bonus a million points for saying koozie instead of cozy, as a few people have done that I've crossed paths with in life, and they insist that it's cozy, and I insist that it's koozie, and I win that argument. But I'm just glad that you're also a winner.
Well, I didn't go to all that schooling for nothing. So I want to talk about that song. What were you doing there?
Yeah. So speaking of cicadas, I kind of wanted to do a song that was kind of incorporating Cicada in some way. And my initial idea was to kind of capture that, to play a modular song that one might listen to as they are watching the sun go down, as the cicadas are singing.
That noise, the cicada noise, that kind of really distinctive ambient noise that was featured throughout the track. How'd you make that in the patch?
So I wanted to just incorporate the cicada sound into the track. Instead of like trying to kind of create the cicada sound, like I was initially intending to kind of synthesize a cicada sound, I just used a recording of it and sampled it and put it through the Phonogene. That allowed me to kind of speed it up and slow it down and give it that kind of, it builds and builds and builds and then slows back down, that kind of ebb and flow. And then I used the Mimeophon to give it some body and have some repeats on it. Because when I think of the cicada or the cicada singing or whatever, you have multiple different groups doing it from different parts of the neighborhood or whatever. It comes up over here a little bit, then comes up over here a little bit. And the two different channels on the Mimeophon allow that kind of swelling in the two different channels. And so that was what I was trying to kind of capture in some way. But then the rest of it was, a rings into clouds patch, but then trying to be able to both have a sequence and also be able to manually put notes in. And then tonight was also the first time I used the DFAM for a drum noise. I didn't clock anything else aside from the sequencer, which was doing the sequence. There was no other there's no other kind of clocking source. Even this wasn't even clocked by itself. The Mother 32's tempo was clocked by the triggers of the Phonogene. So every time that cicada sound goes back to the beginning, it puts out a trigger and it uses that to set the tempo. And all I did in order to keep the tempo at where I wanted it is I just turned down the sound of the cicada, but kept the splicing on the Phonogene at the same level. So to those of you who are familiar with the Phonogene, that probably makes sense. But if not, essentially what is to say is that I clocked everything not on a sequencer. All the sequencers themselves were clocked off the sound of the cicada, if that sounds any cooler.
And clocked is, my understanding, is like a way of keeping all the different parts and all the different signals coming from all the different modules like in the same beat.
Yeah. So it's like it's the tempo, or usually what would happen is with the BeatStep Pro is I would have, like 95 BPM beats per minute, or 120 is a standard beats per minute. Which tells the whole system to always follow that clock. I'm actually going to demonstrate really quickly, so you can maybe understand what I'm saying.
I'm always really interested when you or the guests have different ways of like keeping time or like really approaching, the modular synthesis in ways it's not really embracing the way it's not, in a DAW, not digital, not, you can do it in a box, but doing it out of the box and using these different kinds of ways of signals and oscillators to kind of create different time signatures and kind of control the time that way. And I think it's a really clever way of doing it. And it's also was interesting too, because the cicadas are out here and you can hear the noises of the separate ones kind of rising and flowing, but there's always this drone. It is just like this really in the background, this really drony noise that's constantly going behind all the different kind of oscillations of the ones you can kind of hear more individually. It really reminded me of being outside when you're playing. So I think it was really cool.
So one of the things that's kind of cool about the Phonogene, it's not always that if you're controlling the tempo with something other than like a sequencer. One of the things that's really nice about the Phonogene, if you want to use that trigger that puts out as it cycles, is that it does it in halves, quarters, eighths. So when you increase the tempo, it's not going to fall out of time. You'll increase the beat of the kick, let's say on the DFAM, but it's not going to increase it in a slew. It's not going to slope up or glide up. It's just going to double. And then if you crank it a little more, it's going to quadruple. And then if you crank it a little more, it'll octuple. So it always stays within a grid, if you will. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's throw it out to the audience. Do you guys have any questions about that track?
No, there was a specific section of the song that had a little cool, like higher frequency arpeggio going on, but it was like really weird.
Yeah,
what
I
module
really
are
like
you
that.
using?
So thank you. Thank you. That's good to hear. Because it's one of those things that can work or not. That's the Intellijel scales. It's a quantizer. It's a dual quantizer. I think you can actually set it up to have two 64-step sequences that you can then chain together even. So I think technically, if you are really experienced with the module, you could probably get a 128 step sequence out of it. Right now, the reason why I bought it is because sometimes when I'm playing, I want to have some kind of arpeggiation, or in this case, it's just a 5-note sequence that is going up and down. I use the Wogglebug to give it the kind of the variation, and then I attenuate that with the math, so it doesn't go from like low octave all the way up to the high octave. So I make it so I kind of restrict the range at which the scale randomly selects its notes. And then I just let it go. And that's kind of one of the things, that's the main reason why I bought it, was so that I can just kind of like have another layer of melody or something going on that isn't something I have to sequence out, that I can decide to on the fly if I want to add something. And so far it's working really well. I think it's a really great module. I don't know if you're familiar with the...
Yeah. It sounds really good in the composition, so
yeah.
Really good choice.
And then I'm using the I noticed on your rack, Piotr, is that you have some synthesis technology. You have a module. This is the circuit bent VCO, the E905.
Yeah, 950. I have the same one.
950. Yeah, exactly. So that was I was using the A bank of that oscillator for the sound.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really successful. I really liked it when it came on. I was going to ask about that too, because I really like that. It is now my pleasure to introduce Piotr's song. We're going to play a video he's recorded for us, and then we're going to come back and welcome him back to the show and have a chat. So I'm really looking forward to it. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. Piotr, that was amazing. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Thanks for writing that and playing that for us. So Piotr, welcome to the show. Thanks for having us. Thanks for playing with us. I just want to know what you were doing there. Frederick, do you want to know what he was doing there?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite things to like listen to is that I come from a background of Tangerine Dream or Vangelis or Brian Eno. Certainly that's the kind of music that when I think of ambient, that's where I kind of turn my attention to. And I really think that you capture it so well. I want to know, first of all, what were you doing there? And then also, if you can tell me where do you get your inspiration for ambient music? We all, as musicians, imitate or listen to other people to kind of, get a sense of what is possible with the instruments we choose to play. And I think that you do a really fantastic job of kind of hitting that sound. So yeah, what were you doing there, and where do you listen to in order to kind of get your inspiration for that kind of sound?
Well, I really appreciate your kind words, and I really like when people have nice things to say about what I do. I'll start off with inspirations, I guess. It's very broad because I come from a lot of backgrounds of like different genres of music. It's not so much people that influence me, is the feelings, the emotions, and different genres from ambient music. I listen to a lot of metal, and I do a lot of, in Berklee, I play metal guitar in bands, and it's much different from ambient music, but I find a lot of emotional connections that I can channel through specific harmonic choices in ambient music, and also very much slowed down. And spread out over much longer. Generally, I'd say for inspirations, it would be obviously Vangelis. I'm a huge fan. For more electronic music, deadmau5 is one of my biggest inspirations. And I really like how he can blend different genres together and just make something that you would never hear before. Sure, it isn't much of ambient music, but there's a lot of inspiration that comes from there, like just different variations of notes or different ways to manipulate, I guess, frequencies to make weird sounds. Yeah. Something that he's really good at.
Just as an aside real quick, I don't really listen to a lot of deadmau5, but I do, he's actually really into modular. His studio has walls of modular, and I really like his like YouTube, right? Like, or when he goes on and he just messes around and he makes that. And that's something I actually respect him a lot, because I feel like he knows what he makes for other people, and he knows what he makes for himself. And I think that that's a really great kind of contrast. But I didn't want to go on too long about that.
No, it's cool. Actually, he's one of the first people that really inspired me to start modular. Because I remember back in maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, I was watching some of his videos and some of his songs, and he was explaining how he did something, and he just had this huge wall of modular. I was like, oh my God, one day. So he's definitely one of my biggest inspirations. I'll show you guys my patch. It's probably not gonna be much of help, but I'll try to explain it as best as I can. This is essentially all of my racks put together into one space, I guess, and then all of it is connected. But generally, in this specific thing, I was making it so that everything is clocked by one module, which happens to be Qubit Bloom, which is technically a 64-step sequencer, but it can also branch out to more variations of the main patch. But I actually sent out, as you can see here, the clock is split into the multiple, which goes into different modules, specifically to the ones that are modulating things. Not so much beat or rhythm things, because there isn't much of it in the song. The main kind of chords that are in the background are the Subharmonicon, which I have it running through. I split it so it's not a monophonic sound. I split it into two sounds, and they're both going into two variations of the synthesis technology OTA VCF, which is one of my favorite filters of all time. It just sounds very nice. I don't know. I can't explain it. We have a couple of them at Berklee, and it just sounds out of this planet. So I had to get some. And then from there, it goes into stereo, into clouds in the granular mode. I have the pitch going all the way up so that when you modulate the density, like it jumps into the exactly an octave higher and lower, just depending on what happens. And then from clouds, I have it going into black hole, which is like a diffusion filter, diffusion reverb, as I meant. So it like really like spreads it out. And then from there, it goes into a VCA, like a stereo. And then one of my other voices that I have here is Plaits. And that one is sequenced directly to Bloom. So it plays that short sequence that I have on it. And it's very long and it's very slow. I think I have the clock all the way down on Bloom, so it's like moving very slowly. Yeah. So and then from there, I think I have it going into ripples, which is like I don't know. It's a filter that just sounds like it's a compressor. It glues things together better than I think OTA. But that's the reason I have it going from Plaits rather than going it from Subharmonicon, because I wanted that beefy, more of a background sound. And then actually I'm sending Plaits through ripples through rings as a resonator. So instead of using rings as an oscillator, I'm running it through it as an effect essentially. So that's where all those like resonances come from in the sounds. And then from there, it just goes into the VCA without any reverb. So it's more dry. And then another voice that I have is quad morphing VCO. It's from Synthesis Technology, this one. And I'm only using two outputs from it, but they're going into a qubit tone, which is like a quad low pass filter or a band pass, but I use a low pass in it. And then it goes into the stereo of beads.
Oh, you got the beads. You got the new.
Yeah.
You got beads and clouds running on this.
Yeah, I don't know. I really like beads, but I think I like clouds more. There's something about clouds that's just like a little.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. I have no intention on getting beads, but I like clouds a lot. So I don't feel like. I think some people were disappointed with maybe some of the artifacts and noise that you get with clouds, and I actually like that a little bit. So.
It is definitely a little bit different, and I know what they're trying to do, like the Clouds 2.0, and making it a little bit more sophisticated from the first version. But there's just something lacking in there, and for some reason, I just always go back to Clouds. That's the reason I didn't get rid of it. Clouds just sounds really nice. I essentially tried to make the beat sound as similar to Clouds as possible, ironically, and then use some reverb or like one of the longer time modes on there to make it just a bit longer sounding, and then into the VCA. And then I'm actually using my Intellijel 1U output for like the main output for the system. I have the Pico output, but it doesn't have it's like a stereo output, but it goes into a mono cable, which is really weird. So I decided to do like into the Intellijel, which makes it much easier because I go 2 cables, monophonic cables, into the interface. So that's pretty much it.
I feel like I'm just now getting the sense of where some of my limitations are, and one of my limitations is actually creating that really expansive ambient sound, something that I listen to and I love so much. Like today was supposed to be the cicada with kind of ambient sounds, but for whatever reason, it always ends up changing into something else that sounds more like my sound or my style, I guess. I'm really trying my best to just do a straight, modular ambient patch. And it's something that I found actually very hard. Where did you kind of get into it, and did you struggle with that as well, or was it something that you kind of took to immediately?
Ambience is a very relative term. It can be interpreted in many broad ways. There's a YouTuber, Annie. I think he makes a bunch of like modular renditions, but also a lot of like his interpretation of like ambient music, and I listen to a lot of it. Then there's obviously State Azure.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up for sure.
And I mean, it's just like a huge collection and just amazing sounds.
We'll put that State Azure in the links. Anybody who's interested in the state of like modular ambient music, can go and watch State Azure's YouTube page, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I'm really happy you brought that up.
Yeah, at least once a day I put it on just to like forget what I'm doing. For me, when I do ambient music, I forget 3 things that I always taught in the music school are super important in a song. I don't do rhythm, I don't do melody, and I try to avoid music laws, like break rules essentially. When it comes to rhythm, it was really hard to kind of like just not do it, essentially clock it to the minimum BPM possible. And then just like not even focus on it. Just have like your mind fixated on just flow, essentially. Like just going with a certain vibe, certain emotion and nothing else. Like just being focused on, I guess, the harmony, but also not so much that it becomes distracting. I want it to be something that's in the background, something that you can either watch because you like gear or watch as like in a separate tab and do some work. For people that like gear, I just have my entire rack displayed, and I put patch notes or the thing in description so people can like analyze as they go. Yeah, that's pretty much the and then reverb.
Yeah, and then reverb, right? And that's actually Brian Eno's like definition of ambient music. You should be able to do what you're doing and actually forget that you're listening to it. And then when you want to zero in and you listen, then you can train your focus on it. But it then can fade into the background
there's like a specific subsection of like, if you have like a 30-minute ambient song that's making itself, you listen for the first 3 minutes and then you forget about it, but it's still there. That's what I'm striving for. It's like happening in the background. You're not noticing it unless something cool happens, like, oh, that's cool, and then you forget about it again. That's just so cool.
Jamie wanted to ask a question.
So I listened to your song, and I'm really blown away by how smooth and unclocked it felt. It really moved in a way that didn't feel like it was attached to an electrical impulse, to a computer, and it's made me start thinking. And even in the last 2 minutes, I've been thinking about this more and more, about how what drives me crazy is when I sit down to make a song, it starts with a grid, right? Like you sit there and you have a clock or a section of 8 measures because the UI shows you that you have this much space. Like when you're hearing your song that you played, what tempo are you feeling in your mind, in your body? Like what are you counting as
Nothing.
It plays? You're not, right? And then, so when I start a song, sometimes I feel pinned to a clock and a measure system, and feeling like quantized from the get-go. I'm just wondering, how do you like escape that? I think I know the answer. I think is what you said, is that you allow one module to control the pace, and you forget about everything else. But in a world where some of these pieces of equipment have think in 8 beats, how does one defeat that and like make ambient music while ignoring the digital or electrical counter construct that they're working under?
It's an interesting question. It's most of modules that are sequencers that have some kind of clock to them, like they move in a specific tempo, like they jump to notes at a specific time. Either slave them to a clock that can go as slow as possible, or make the tempo go all the way down, and then just like have that one note there. Even if it's a 64-step sequencer, I just have that one note for as long as possible, and I essentially drone the performance. So I just have a drone and I try to build on it. So instead of focusing on, okay, I have this arpeggio here it's a sequence of 8 steps and it loops around, I just leave it on that one note and then I build harmonies on top of them. And then that's how sometimes I don't even worry about the rhythm, because I'm worried, like I'm focusing so much on the harmony and the attention to like how I'm going to spread out throughout the frequency spectrum, that rhythm doesn't even cross my mind at that point. You don't even need a sequencer at that point. You can just have like one oscillator going into directly output, and then just have one droning note, and then build on top of it, and then see how it takes you and what direction you can then branch it out to that makes it feel like it's a story.
There's something also, in my view, is being okay with that sound lasting. I think a lot of people who make music, who are accustomed to making music in very traditional forms, when they hear a sound too long, they get uncomfortable. There's something about breaking that discomfort and being able to kind of sit in that note for a long while. I mean, you can still feel discomfort, and maybe that's even productive in some ways, but to be okay with it. And in some ways, you said you listen to metal like Sun O. I was thinking like this idea of like really slow beats, huge harmonic scale, harmonic range as far as the different resonances that are in the distortion of the guitars.
Mm-hmm. Piotr, you when you were answering those questions, you talked about a couple things we wanted to touch on. Mm-hmm. You said when you're at Berklee, and you're currently a student at the Berklee School of Music in Boston. I spent a lot of my life in Boston as a student. It's where I learned to swear at strangers in public on the street if they look at you weird. Yes, you laugh because it's a thing you learn. Yeah, I want to talk about that, but you also yes, it's a thing. But he also talked about this idea of letting go of these rules about music and how you write these songs. Is that something you're encouraged to do at Berklee? Is that something you're not encouraged to do? Is that kind of what kind of feedback do you get when you're taking classes? Or is this something you're kind of exploring outside of your curriculum?
At Berklee, we were taught a lot of rules, essentially all of them. Like how to, how to write harmonically, how to write with other people, how to make your instrument blend in or stand out depending on the situation. Professors tell us to break rules, but only if we understand what we're doing, that we're breaking them. You know, if we understand the general concept, then we're welcome to, change them. It's perfectly fine to do that as long as it sounds interesting and cool, or it doesn't have to. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah. So like, as long as you know the rules, Jamie put this in the chat, as long as you have to know the rules before you can break them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some people might argue with that perspective. I was somebody who didn't learn theory until very late in my life, or I'll say recently. I'm not dead yet, but relatively recently, probably the last 5 or 6 years is where I really kind of hunkered down to get understanding of theory. And it's something that I really regret not doing earlier. But then at the same time, you have like modular synthesis, which really doesn't lend itself to that kind of education. It's a different kind of education that you're learning. And in some ways, it actually maybe teaches you more, because you're learning about hertz, and you're learning about frequency mm-hmm. in ways that I don't think you probably do in a traditional kind of music education. Can you give me a sense of what it's like on a high-end college music college rather environment with all these synthesizers? Is it happening? Is there a lot of synthesizers going on out there? Or to my mind, when I think of a lot of music schools, in that way, whether it's a conservatory or Juilliard or Berklee, it's a lot of these traditional instruments. Can you give me a sense of what the modular synth's role is on a campus like Berklee?
Yeah. So, as long as synthesis was around, in Berklee, it started relatively recently. I'd say about 2013 or 2014 is when
really?
Some of my some of my professors started like, let's make a lab of like just modulars, and let's have people learn how to use them and how to incorporate that into their music, I guess. We do have a couple, like we in our electronic production design labs. We have 8 stations of fully decked modular systems with tools that will help you learn how to use them. In my major, we have 2 classes that are dedicated to learning modular synthesis. We're using modular alongside Max to kind of understand both of those spectrums. And through understanding modular, we get to understand how actual synthesizers work on the computer these days.
Real quick, can you explain what Max is?
Yeah, Max is by a company called Cycling 74, and it's like an environment or a program. It can be anything really. You just have to program it. It's like a tool essentially to make either synthesizers or tools for changing patches on a keyboard while you're playing clocked to something else, or making videos through generating random notes from something else. It's really up to the person that's making the patch or the program.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One of the, my final questions is, how has the pandemic reoriented your musicianship towards modular, and how do you see your practice with synthesis happening after pretty soon here? We're going to be seeing a lot of these things open up. So how do you think that you're going to, where do you think you're going to go with this afterwards? Do you plan on performing? Do you plan on having, because you definitely have the talent and you definitely have the drive. But
I appreciate the kind words. So before the pandemic started, I really, before coming even to Berklee, I was like, I have to learn this stuff. The module, I was like, I have some way or another, I have to understand how to do, because I was just fascinated by all the walls everywhere in Dead Mouse' house. When I got into my major and I had those classes, they were pretty fast at pace. And even though I was trying to understand what I was doing, I had other classes going on too. Berklee is you don't sleep if you're a producer. Even though I was trying to understand it, I had trouble. And when the pandemic happened, I was essentially locked in my room for 9 months. And I just drilled it into my brain, just practiced every day. Okay, what does this do? What happens if I connect this to that? And then because I did that myself, I have much more of an understanding of why things work the way they work. And through trial and error, I got to the point that I'm at now. As much as I don't appreciate the fact that I wasn't able to hang out with people and stay for the 2 to 6 a.m. studio sessions and bring beer and jam and stuff like that, I am very grateful that I got the time to do something that I wanted to do for a good amount of time.
Piotr, I think something I, starting the show and working on the YouTube channel, working on Frederick's YouTube channel, something else you do in addition to the quality of your songs is you are really consistent with the production on your YouTube channel and on Instagram, producing music, kind of getting these videos out there, really sticking to it, really working on it. What's your process for that? It's not just about having talent, it's not just about loving the music, but you have to have a kind of a method, a means by which to create this. I don't want to say content, but to create the content, really stick to it to be successful. Mm-hmm. What's your method for that?
So I have a general plan. I write out months in advance, and I write ideas for videos that I could potentially have, and then write them down. And then right now I make videos every 2 days. So I essentially have them planned at least 2 weeks in advance to know exactly what I'm going to do. Sometimes videos pop up that I wasn't expecting to make. For example, yesterday BTS released Butter, one of their songs, and it hit 124 million views in one day. Long
time fan of the show, Sarah. Sarah, if you're watching this, she's an Army member. She's into it.
Yeah.
She embroiders their silhouettes in needlepoint and sells them online.
Yeah,
it's the whole thing.
That's cool. Yeah,
it is cool.
So I'm also an Army member. I watch all the videos.
They're so good. Also, it's so good. The dancing's so good. The music's so good. They can all sing.
Yeah.
They can. The hip hop elements are really, particularly BTS is really good. There's a reason it's so popular. It's really good.
Mm-hmm. And I just finished recording Butter. I wrote everything. in MIDI, and then I played it through my synthesizers today, the whole day. I'm editing it tonight, mixing, mastering, and then putting the video tomorrow. So that was something unplanned, but I wanted to do it just ahead of everyone else. And then aside from that, I just have things that I would be interested in doing on Instagram and on YouTube, things that would interest my audience on Instagram and YouTube as general. And never force videos. If I make something and it doesn't sound good to me, I'm not gonna put it out. I'm just gonna scratch it. And if I like the idea still, I'll remake it. And if I don't like it anymore because I get just tired of making it, I'm gonna move on to something else. I'm never forcing videos to happen because I have to like it in the first place. And then if I'm really happy about it, about the final outcome, then I'll schedule it for release for another time. It always has to come from me liking it in the first place and like enjoying making it in the process. Because that's the only way that I'm enthusiastic about it. And then I think people will see it when they watch my videos too.
I always feel like that's the trick when you're doing stuff you're not getting paid to do, which is like, if you're not enjoying it and you're not getting paid, then what? Then what are we doing here?
There's a little caveat. I think I think what you're saying is true, and it's something that I do as well. Is that like I'm really critical and I really try to put out the best stuff. And for me, one thing that was useful as kind of I don't want to call it a counterpoint, but maybe like something that is another perspective that can work differently is sometimes you have to be willing to let go of things that you may not be all that enthused of. But I know for myself, for instance, there wouldn't have been a video 3 if video 1 and 2 I didn't like force myself to let go of. Mm-hmm. But to your point about being self-critical and about really wanting to enjoy the work that you're putting out, I 100% co-sign that perspective. I do think, however, for myself, that there is this other perspective of if I didn't put out everything that I didn't like, I would have very little content to put out. You know, mm-hmm. So
my strategy is to make things I'm not proud of and coerce people into listening to them at campfires while we're camping, as is the case with many of my music choice. I don't believe in retaking. I don't believe in doing it again. I do one take, I mix it together, I layer on top of it, and I put something out.
All right. Well, Frederick, do you have anything else?
That last question was actually it. The idea of that discipline is something that I think is really important, not only for audience, you know, to maintain viewership and to get the views that you want to get and the growth that you want to get, but for yourself, like to, you know. So that was my last kind of question, which you so nicely asked, Alex.
Piotr, is there anything else you want to say before we move on to the shameless plugs portion of our program?
Oh, I'm just really grateful to be on the show, and you know, it's very nice so far.
Oh, well, we're so grateful to have you. You know, I do the Instagram account. I really enjoy like watching people's feeds and watching the videos come through, and I always really like yours. Speaking of Instagram, we are now to the shameless plug portion of the evening. I think some people out there in our audience hopefully are seeing you for the first time. Where can they hear more of your music?
So they're on my YouTube page. It's my name, Piotr Garbaczonek, just like that. It's gonna probably be in the description. I also do Instagram short videos once every so often. I release music on Spotify and Apple Music as well. All of it is my name.
Awesome. Frederick, how about you?
On Saturday, this is a 50% chance. I'm playing a drone, a all drone, 17 slots, all day, May 29th, next Saturday, in fact.
For International Drone Day.
That's right, International Drone Day. I'll put a link in the description as far as where you can view that. And I'm going to try and kind of take some of the concepts that we discussed today and maybe transform the cicada concept and into maybe something that's a lot more drone centric. I'm
really looking forward to Drone Day, and I didn't know that you were performing in it, and so I was going to watch anyway. But now I'm going to watch. I'm going to have two screens going at the same time. I'm going to watch twice.
But you know what? Before we sign off, forgive me if I'm stepping on your words, but I wanted to take a moment to thank Piotr for being here. I really do appreciate you coming on. I know that when you accepted the invitation, you were in the middle of a really hectic schedule. We were really thankful that you got to do that. And I thought it was really maybe important that we reach out to somebody who just makes those videos and is making work, and to kind of extend that invitation. And I'm really, really pleased that you did. And I really look forward to seeing what you do. And I'm sure it will be great. So thank you so much. And I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been really nice, and I appreciate the kind words.
The thing I would like to shamelessly plug is our next show on June 5th. We're off next week, but on June 5th, we have From Earth Modular Society, Carnalex is here, and he's one of my favorite synthesists on that channel. Some of it incorporates some music. It's got a bass incorporating some of it. That is a really cool effect. I'm just really looking forward to it. And so I think you guys should keep an eye on this space and wait for our next video. But that's it. I'd like to also thank Piotr for coming. I'd like to thank the audience, thank Jamie for coming and asking such great questions. And I would like to pour my heart out to Frederick Foxtrott for doing all the work, for making this video, for playing the music and making this whole thing happen. And I think that is going to be it for us tonight. Keep watching the outro. Piotr has made a song for us for the outro, and it's gonna be really fun. So thank you all so much for watching, and good night. Have a good one.
Fuck it, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. I don't give a fuck.